like a feathered pen dipped in ink? Huh? Well, absolutely. Well, it'd only be fair if there's a picture of me, right? So I go the punishment a little bit. Okay, we're going to be in Romans chapter 12. Did this thing get smaller? It's like one of our sixth graders came up here and was like, we're going to preach the word. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so Romans 12 is where we're going to be tonight, and we're finishing up our 3-week series called Fantasy, right, where we've spent the last couple weeks talking about dating and relationships and sex and how all of that kind of falls into place and what that is to look like, how God has designed it, and what happens when we kind of take it out of the way that God has designed, right? And so in week 1, we talked about how every man and woman is created in the image of God, that when God looked over creation and he began to create the seas and the sky and nature and the world and everything within it, when he created us, he did it with a different bit of intention by looking over it and saying, man, I'm going to create man and woman in my image. That is, that they are to have some things that the rest of nature does not have. And so we're to treat each other differently. That when we look at each other, we say, okay, so that person has the image of God, which means that they have a different integrity. I am to honor them and respect them a little bit differently. And then last week we talked about how if we're to be followers of Jesus, that we're called to this thing called holiness, which means that we look different than the rest of culture, which means that we participate in sex differently than the rest of culture. And so when the rest of culture says anywhere, at any time, with anybody, right, we say, well, no, we think that this thing God has created to exist in a certain realm. And then this week we're going to look at it and we go, okay, if God has created sex to exist only within the confines of marriage and for all sexual things to exist within the confines of marriage and not outside of it, why does he do that? And why do we struggle with it so much way before we get to marriage? Why would we struggle with something? Why would we want something way before we get there? And then the truth is, too, that if I am to believe what God has put forward about sex, if I am to believe that, why would he make it that way? What is the big picture that he is looking at? Okay, so in 6th grade was when I began to ride the bus, okay? For like all of elementary school, my dad took me and my sister to school, and then in 6th grade, school and stuff started at different times, and my parents had different jobs they had to get to, and so I began to ride the bus. And so it was kind of like this like early moment of independence, okay? Right when you're 16, it's independence because you can get your car and drive wherever you want. Well, the bus was like early independence because I couldn't go wherever I wanted, but where I was going, I was at least going without my parents, right? And I had to like get up on my own, be outside, wait on the bus on my own. There was always like this weird thought in the back of my head that was like, what if I just like miss the bus? I don't know. What would happen, right? So there's all this responsibility. And so I began to ride the bus, and when I'd ride the bus, after a few times, you begin to like, there's like a whole like social structure that begins to exist there because you make friends there. They're the people that you ride to and from school with every day, and a bus trip was always way too long. It was like 45 minutes by the time we made all the stops and all this different stuff. And so you had an hour and a half every day to build relationships with people that maybe you didn't have class with and things like that. And so when I would ride the bus, I met this girl. I know, I start a lot of stories that way, and usually they end with Haley, and this one doesn't, so it's sadder, right? And so I meet this girl, right? And me and her and a few other people who ride the bus, like we all kind of become friends as every budding romance starts, right? You're just hanging out. Things are just friendly. And then after a while, right, I begin to, in all of my 12-year-old self, be like, I think that I have what must be feelings for this person, right? And so what comes of that is my very first, like, real life girlfriend. So early, so quick to the table. I know. It was a very intriguing time. And it was like a moment, it was like right around the time that I got like my first cell phone, so I was able to have like conversations without someone having to like call my house and be like, hey, Mr. Malikian, can I talk to Lane? And it was right around that other people started to get their own cell phones. Like this, we used to have to, back in the day, y'all don't know this life, okay? This is the worst thing in the world. A dude used to have to get on the phone as a middle schooler and call up a girl's house, and their dad would answer the phone, and he would be like, hey, Mr. So-and-so, can I talk to your daughter? And my voice sounds like that at 26, so you can only imagine what it sounded like at 12. And there'd be this huge hulking dad on the other end of the line. They'd be like, who's this? And you're like, nobody. It's nobody. Just get the phone up, please. Or you start like that pre-prayer, like to God, like, please just let her answer the phone. Or the mom. The mom would be great. That'd be a great option. And so I started to have a cell phone, and I was able to have conversations outside of this realm, and so it was kind of like my first bit of like, ooh, this is interesting. It was even like during holiday season time, so we bought each other Christmas gifts. It was great. I got a CD that year. That means nothing to you, right? You just take all your music offline. Some of y'all probably steal it because you're little criminals. But like I got like a CD. Oh, dude, it was great. It's the thing that great romance is made of. We would write books about it. It'd be a really short like picture book, but it'd be a book. And here's the thing: when we think about dating, when we think about relationships, man, if we're let's be real. If we're the girls in the room and we're thinking so far and we're like marriage, Mr. Perfect, if we're the guy in the room, we're like, what's for lunch tomorrow? And so you're like thinking and you're like, oh man, what's this going to be like? You fantasize about the starts, about the beginnings, about what it'll be like, right? What will we say to one another? How will it develop? I bet he'll have so many words. He won't have so many words. His entire vocabulary is made up of movie quotes. Don't get your hopes up. You'll sit there, you'll be like, oh man, I bet we'll go on like this. Maybe our first date will have candles. It won't have candles unless he sets the place on fire. Like, all these things. You've got all these ideas of firsts. And that's what you fantasize and that's what you think about. And I'm in this world, in a middle school world, it was the great romance. It lasted all of about 3 months, which in that time is like decades, okay? Absolutely, just people are like, it's month 2, you're still together? Yeah. Have you named your kids yet? We're like, yeah, it's great. Steven's going to be awesome. And and 3 months later comes that moment where sometimes 2 people, oftentimes 1 person realizes, I think this one's run its course. I no longer have what my 12-year-old self 3 months ago was like, I think these are feelings. I no longer have those same things, and that must mean this relationship is over. It is time for me to break the news to this girl. And so we break up. Not mutually, unfortunately. Did she cry? Yes, she did. Look at me. Okay. I'm kidding. I don't remember that far back. Okay. It's 14 years ago. So we get to the end of this thing, right? And I'm like, okay, this is my first breakup. I've waded the waters. I've done the tough parts. I've had the conversation. What I don't realize is it happens over the weekend and that eventually Monday morning is going to come and I have to get to school. And one of us isn't going to change buses. There's only one route. And so I've broken up with somebody that I am permanently stuck to on the same vehicle twice a day, every day for the rest of the school year, and it's January. There's still a better half left. And so I wake up that morning and I'm like, it's time to get on the bus! And it was like that, and in that tone. And I go outside, and I begin to get on, I'm like sweating. I'm like, all of me is sweating, right? Like, I'm not even wearing deodorant yet because it's 6th grade. I haven't discovered it yet. And I get onto the bus, and I look, back left corner. There she is. And so I look, front left, where no one wants to sit. No one wants to sit by the bus driver. That's where nothing good can happen there. No fun can happen there. And I look in front left seat, and I go, this looks to be where I'm sitting for the rest of the school year, okay? Because here's the deal. For any of us that have ever been through the dating relationship and the breakup world, we got so excited about the beginning and the Instagram photos we were going to take and all our friends that were going to comment on it and be like, oh my gosh, #goals, you're a dream. And we get excited about the fact that, oh, we're not going to feel lonely for all of 7 seconds. And, oh, we're not going to have this thing. And here's all these things that are going to happen. But what we didn't think of is we didn't go, oh man, and when it's over, it's going to be great. No, that's a whole nother Spotify playlist. Okay, like we did not think about this. We did not get into the relationship and go, you know what I can't wait for? That breakup. Oh, it's going to be the stuff that books are made of, right? We didn't think about that. That's not how we start anything. That's not how we begin to engage relationships. That's not how we begin to join into those things. But here's the deal. There's only 2 ways that your relationship ends. Either at the altar or over. Like, that's it. It either ends or it gets to the altar. And let me just tell you, statistically, I don't have like the exact statistics, but the odds are not in your favor. And every time people go, oh, okay, well, yeah, but oh, there's so-and-so down the road, and I knew so-and-so too. That's the small percentage. Very few people go, well, I know 7 million people that this all worked out for. It just doesn't happen. And so the odds are at the altar or that it's going to be somebody else at the altar. There will be a breakup. There will be an ending. There will be this over thing. And what it creates in our lives is this great anxiety and tension with this other person. And now, all of a sudden, there's this other person that has to sit on the other side of the bus as us, right? Or that we walk through the halls and we're like, oh no, next route. Or that we don't talk to anymore, or that we talk worse about. And we have this complete relationship with somebody else that is 100% negative. Right? Even when we're like, yeah, we broke up, like we're still going to be friends. That's like 99% of the time a lie. It's a great dream, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And then we get into this tension if we're saying, man, I want to be a follower of Jesus, which means I want to love God. When Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment, Jesus hits him back and he gives two things, right? He says, I want to love God and to love people. And so I want to follow Jesus. I want to love God and I want to love people, but then I'm going to intentionally enter into relationships that are going to create scenarios with which it is impossible for me to love people. That's really difficult. Like, that's a lot of tension. There's a lot of struggle there. We're going to regularly enter into, sometimes, multiple times, relationships that are going to make it difficult for me to love them and to respect them and to honor them, because when we break up, there's going to be this huge tension. And then it gets really, really, really sticky when we talk about, like last week, and that when we begin to date and we begin to pursue relationships, and that all of a sudden, the idea or the motivation of sex then begins to enter into play. And the further that we go, the more physical that we are, the more intimate that we are, when it is over, the messier it is. The more tension there is. The harder it is. And so we're regularly choosing to enter into relationships that exist completely outside of the two greatest commandments that God has given us. It makes it impossible to exist there. It makes it difficult. It just leaves frustration. And here's the deal. We can begin to bind ourselves. No, it's not true that, it's sex. It's just this physical thing. That over and over again, what happens is when we begin to feel something, when we get to realize that there's truth and we go, okay, yeah, like that begins to make sense. Then sometimes what we do is we step back and we go, okay, then with all of my energy, I'm going to deem it not true. And so I'm just going to be able to date and not have awkward tension. I'm going to be able to date and not be mad at this person later. I'm going to be able to date and not have bitter feelings towards this person. I'm going to be able to date and there not be relational tension. It's just not true. And then we take it further and we go, okay, and within the confines of this relationship, there's going to be a physical intimacy that we talked about last week that's only for marriage, that sex and sex of any kind and all of sexual immorality and all those things, all of that is only to exist within marriage in order for it to not be called sexual immorality and for it to just be called sex. And so we go, okay, and that's going to begin to exist in this relationship, true, but it's just going to be this physical thing, and so it's not going to be a big deal, and it's not going to affect you and me, but we know that that's impossible because here's the deal. If it were just physical, listen, I've never been upset that my wife played basketball with somebody else. You know why? Because basketball is just shooting hoops, running laps, jumping, playing ball. But if my wife were to have sexual interactions with other people, yeah, I'm going to be mad. Because it's not just physical. Because we know no matter how hard we try to fight it, and every breakup song ever has taught us that there is something inherently emotional that happens within sexual intimacy. And that the more intimate we are, the more emotional it is. And then really what we really know, if we were to really attack the core of it, there's something inherently spiritual that happens within it because it's even separate than everything else that just attacks us emotionally. Because it does things differently that even words and other physical interactions just can't seem to do. And so it is a separate level of intimacy that creates a separate level of tension within our lives. And when it exists outside of marriage, it is made to burn down relational bridges. When it exists within marriage, and marriage in the way that it's supposed to exist, in a covenant that is long-lasting forever into eternity, that it's able to exist safely in the way that it should be, and we don't have to worry about relational bridges being burned. But when it exists outside of that, that's when fire takes place. And we know this because when we read in Romans 12, we actually come into a point in Scripture, and it's not even actually talking about sex or anything of the sort. It just simply talks about, here is how you are to feel and relate to one another. Here's what your interaction should be. And we can take this principle and go, okay, if this is how our interaction should be, then it applies to all areas of life. We can't always do that, but we can definitely do that in this moment. And in Romans 12, we get into this interesting part in verse 14, and it actually kind of begins to talk about confrontation, right? Which actually is a great way to talk about how relationships often end. And actually, if we begin to take the furthest level of intimacy with the relationship, when it's over, the higher the level of confrontation is. The more likely we are to be able to talk about someone, gossip us about someone, be bitter towards someone, or angry towards someone, and oftentimes the harder it is to get out of a relationship when we need to. In 14, it just says, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And then in verse 16, this is where we want to live right here. And live in harmony with one another. Maybe your translation says to be at peace with one another. Do not be proud, instead associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own estimation. It begins everything from like 9 to around 19 is a list of different things of how to interact with one another and how we fight and how we treat one another. In verses 9 early on, it talks about loving one another and showing each other a separate honor, which we've talked about in the last couple weeks. But here's the deal. We have this command to live in harmony with one another. It is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to live in harmony with people that we're regularly entering into intimate relationship and walking out of. Because it's not how we were created. It's not how we were made to function. God does not give us commands that are outside of the way that we were made to function in the way we were created. We were not made to feel miserable over and over and over again coming out of relationships, because we were not made to regularly enter into relationships for sexual intimacy to exist and then to walk out of them. It's not how we were created. That's why we feel miserable coming out of it. It's not how it's supposed to function. And so sometimes when we talk about sex, we go, oh man, don't do it, that's for later. Some of us, we begin to not talk about why. Here's why. Because God wants you to have healthy relationships, and he wants you to have as many healthy relationships as possible. He wants you to be able to relate to people. He wants you to be able to connect with other people. The tie for the greatest command in loving God is loving other people. He wants that. And so why would we take something and put it into areas that make it impossible to do that? Makes it impossible. And you can talk with any adult that is married, that has put in the time and maybe has a record of dating, no matter what their background is, and begin to say, man, if I could do it over again, I would do it differently. I've almost never met an adult, even just in the confines of dating, that when talking to them said, if you could do it over, would you do it over? Yes. Would you do it better? Yes. Would you date anybody until you met that person? Absolutely not. Every time. It never fails. And so if even just in the confines of a 6th grader awkwardly walking into the bus and he feels the relational tension, how much more when we let sex walk into the relationship? How much more tension? How much more chaos? God is not a God of chaos. He wants us to live in harmony. Why would we let chaos walk into our relationships through sex? Listen, I guarantee you right now, sex is causing more chaos in your school than it's causing harmony. And you know, like you get me, because that's what people talk about. That's what people gossip about. That's what people struggle about. Who did this with who? Who said this with who? Who said this? That's what's creating chaos in your school, is sex. You think God created something to invent chaos? No. He wants us to live in harmony. So we put it where it belongs. Like, that's what God wants from you. He's not stealing fun. He's trying to create a place for you to have healthy relationships and a healthy way to do it. And he doesn't want to trail the relationships behind us that we wish we could do differently. But then here's this. Some of us hear this, and just like last week, and we go, man, there's a trail of relationships behind me more than anything. I mean, I'm not living in harmony. I'm at chaos with a lot of different people in my school. You're right. The taking sex out of the way that God designed it, taking relationships out of the way that God designed it, is creating more chaos in my life than peace. And I'm so far removed from it, I don't even understand how peace can begin to feel present. Even if you're someone who's like, oh man, I hate drama. Man, letting that stuff walk into your life. You love drama. You love chaos, letting that walk in. And then we look at that, and here's the deal. The intention of the gospel is that where God creates peace and we bring in chaos, Jesus comes to turn that chaos into peace. Not that he would let us live somewhere that is wrong and try and make it right, but that through forgiveness and new life, that what was once broken, he can make new, that the God who loves peace, that when you and I were living in chaos, he would call us into peace. That we would see a God who loves peace so much that he would make a way through Jesus to forgive us of sin, to give us new life, to give us a new way forward, to give us a new way for sex to exist within the confines of a loving relationship between a man and a wife who are there for each other, who love each other. That we would see new vision and we would walk into it and peace would begin to exist in our life slowly. That's how God makes new things. That where we once lived in chaos, we begin to live in peace. He wants healthy relationships for you. So why would we let chaos walk through the door when he's given us an option for peace? One of the craziest things about being married, there is one girl outside of Haley that I ever dated that I still ever talk to and that Haley likes. One. I grew up with her in youth ministry and in middle school and high school, and she was like a big part of my family, and we dated for a very, very, very short stint. And the reason that Haley enjoys being around her is because she knows that in the very short stint that me and that girl dated, that she cared so much more about God and loved God more than she ever loved me, that she protected everything that was about me that was for Haley one day. That she saw a bigger picture, and she wasn't concerned about our dating relationship. She was concerned about something that was in the future. She saw a bigger picture and said, chaos will not walk into our relationship. Peace will live here. She saw Jesus in the midst of it. And I say that because here's the deal. I talked about it last week. I think it's so much better for you to just not date. I really think it is. And some of y'all roll your eyes at me, boo. Because I don't want to see you let chaos walk into your relationship and you're like, we're going to be the ones. Great. Fantastic. I hope you let me do your wedding one day. But here's the deal. Why would you build a door for chaos to walk in? But should you build the door, you better put as many locks up as possible. You better see so far forward and pursue peace at such great costs. Your love for Jesus better be so great that you love them way more than you love yourself and that other person. Because one day it's probably not going to be you. And it's a really great place to be able to see the person that it is and shake hands with them and say, man, I am so excited for your marriage. I'm so excited for your relationship. There's no tension between me and them because we love God and we protected everything that's yours. That's a great way to have walked out of that. It's a fantastic way to have walked out of that. Don't we want that for our friends? Even if we're so attracted to them. We're best friends, man. I'm in love with them. Great. If you love somebody, don't you want something better for them moving forward? If you love somebody, don't you want the relationship with God to not be you to be a distraction of the relationship with God? Don't you want them to not live in chaos? Do you want to create chaos in their life? Everything that I thought I used to know about love is nothing compared to what I know about love now. And I know this, I don't want to create chaos in my wife's life. And I would never do anything to create chaos in her life. So why now would you create in each other's? As you go into small groups, we're going to talk about, hey, how do we live in peace with one another in our relationships? Here's what we do sometimes. We think about this, we go, man, God's first, and then this is here, and then this is here, and then this is here. And sometimes we begin to say, that sounds really good, man, God's first, but we actually separate him from the second, third, fourth, and fifth thing. What's much more important is how do I make God first here? And God first here? And God, if I'm to love God and to love people, then I'm to do it within the confines of the loft, within the confines of the church, within the confines of my school, within the confines of my home, within the confines of my dating relationship, which means that I don't let chaos build a home in any of those places. And so how do I pursue harmony? And if I'm honest with myself, I know that sex creates more chaos than peace every single time within that relationship, then how do I pursue a right way forward with where I'm at? And if you're not dating and you have this great intention of when you will date and that you will do it the right way, man, how do you continue to pursue peace, and how do you invite people along to pursue peace with you? And this, that you don't judge those that are living in chaos. Sometimes you're so deep in drowning in chaos that you have no idea what peace would look like. And so for those of us that are living in peace, how do we come alongside those in chaos and love them and invite them into a different way of seeing things and having a relationship with one another, that it would glorify God, that we would see a new way out?